The letter arrived on a pale morning in March, its envelope edged with dust as though it had travelled through time itself. Eleanor Finch, curator at the Victoria Gallery in London, turned it over in her trembling hands. The wax seal bore the crest of Rosefield Hall, a name she had never heard before. Inside, in neat legal handwriting, the words were clear: "You are the sole heir to Rosefield Hall, Norfolk." Eleanor read it twice, certain it was a mistake. She had no relatives in Norfolk. Her parents had died years ago, and the only family she'd known were distant cousins in Manchester. Yet the solicitor's signature was genuine, and the address of the estate precise. 3 days later, she found herself driving through the fog-shrouded countryside, the hum of her small car swallowed by silence. When she reached the gates, they stood ajar, as though expecting her. A long gravel drive led to the mansion, its facade grand but tired, ivy curling over cracked stone. The windows, dark and still, reflected the grey sky like old glass eyes. Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, greeted her with a stiff nod. "Miss Finch. The late owner left the place to you. Been empty nearly 10 years, it has." "Who was the last owner?" Eleanor asked. "Lady Beatrice Harland. Passed away in 1978. A tragic woman, they say." That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor wandered through the halls. Portraits of solemn ancestors lined the staircase, their painted eyes following her steps. She paused in the study where the air was thick with the scent of parchment and dust. On the mahogany desk lay a small wooden box. She opened it gently, and found a bundle of yellowed letters tied with faded blue ribbon. The first one read, "My dearest, if you ever find these words, know that I never stopped waiting for you by the water's edge." Eleanor's pulse quickened. The letter was signed, Beatrice. But as she turned the page, a sudden sound broke the silence, the faint click of a door upstairs, though she was certain she'd locked every room before dark. When she looked up, the chandelier above her swayed, ever so slightly, though no wind passed through the hall. And somewhere beyond the staircase, a floorboard creaked, as if someone, or something, had just stepped closer. Eleanor froze, every sense alert. The creaking floorboard repeated, slow and deliberate, as if pacing her movements. She strained her ears, but the house returned only silence. Yet the air felt heavier, as though someone unseen shared the hallway with her. She remembered the letters. One lay open on the desk: "My dearest, do not be afraid, for I am waiting to be heard." The words seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim candlelight, though Eleanor knew it was impossible. Gathering courage, she whispered, "Hello." No answer. Only a soft sigh, like the breath of someone passing by. Eleanor's eyes darted to the staircase. Shadows pulled in the corners, twisting as though alive. Slowly, she climbed the steps, each creak under her foot echoing through the hall. At the top landing, a corridor stretched ahead, lined with closed doors. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. One door at the far end was slightly ajar. Eleanor approached, drawn by a strange compulsion. Inside the room, moonlight spilled across the floorboards. A small desk, identical to the one below, stood against the wall. And on it, a single envelope addressed to Eleanor Finch. Hands trembling, she opened it. Inside, another letter from Beatrice, though the handwriting seemed impossibly fresh. "If you read these words, the past and present meet in this house. Beware the choices you make, for some stories never end." A sudden thump echoed from the attic above, startling Eleanor. She turned, heart pounding, to see the silhouette of a figure at the far end of the hallway. Just for a second, a woman in early 20th century dress, pale and sorrowful, stood watching her. Then she vanished. Eleanor clutched the letter, shivering. The house was alive, whispering secrets, and it seemed that Beatrice's story was far from finished. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, and the faint sound of a piano drifted down the hall, though no instrument could be seen. Eleanor knew then, with chilling certainty, that she had stepped into a story that refused to stay on paper. Eleanor could not sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the dark silhouette of Rosefield Hall against the moonlit sky. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint echoes of laughter and music from decades past. She wondered how a house could remember so much, hold so many stories within its walls. The next morning, Eleanor began to explore systematically. The house had hundreds of rooms, many locked or sealed, but one small closet beneath the stairs drew her attention. Inside, tucked behind a stack of old coats, she found a leather-bound diary. The cover was cracked, and the initials BH were engraved in gold. She opened it cautiously. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, and it spoke directly to her. March 3, 1912. Today I saw him again. Every moment without him feels like a century. If anyone ever reads this, understand that love and fear are intertwined, and some choices cannot be undone. Eleanor read on, page after page revealing Beatrice's secret life. A forbidden romance with a man her family despised. Letters she never sent. Plans to escape that never succeeded. The diary described long walks by the lake, whispered promises under the moonlight, and the shadow of betrayal that loomed over every moment. Suddenly, a loose floorboard creaked behind her. Eleanor spun around. The corridor was empty, but the air felt charged, as though the house itself was warning her to proceed carefully. By afternoon, she had gathered the courage to visit the lake described in the diary. The fog hung low over the water, and the trees bent under the weight of the mist. Every step echoed across the surface of the lake, as if the past was walking beside her. Then she saw it, a small wooden boat, tethered to the shore, gently rocking. A piece of paper lay inside, water-stained but legible. Do not ignore the story. The hall will not rest until its tale is told. Eleanor's heart raced. Rosefield Hall was alive, and Beatrice's spirit, or the memory of her, was guiding Eleanor into secrets that had been buried for over a century. She had no choice. The house demanded her attention, and the diary was only the beginning. That night, Eleanor could hear the house settling, but also something else, a soft humming, almost like a lullaby. She followed the sound, climbing the narrow staircase that led to the attic. Dust motes danced in the moonlight, and the air smelled of old wood and forgotten memories. The attic door was slightly ajar, revealing a space crammed with furniture, trunks, and canvases stacked haphazardly. In the far corner, a large portrait leaned against the wall, covered in a thick layer of dust. Eleanor approached, brushing her fingers across the canvas. The portrait depicted a young woman in a blue dress, standing by a lake, her eyes wide and sorrowful. Eleanor froze. It was Beatrice. She looked almost alive, as if her gaze followed Eleanor across the room. A sudden draft slammed the attic door shut behind her. Eleanor jumped, heart pounding. The humming stopped. Silence pressed in from every corner. Then, a whisper, faint and urgent, came from the portrait. Find the letters I could not send. Only then will you understand. Eleanor's hands shook, but she knew she could not leave. She began searching through the trunks and drawers, discovering bundles of unopened letters, envelopes still sealed. Each one carried the pain and passion of Beatrice's life, a story Eleanor felt compelled to complete. Hours passed, the night deepening around her. With every letter read, she felt Beatrice's presence grow stronger, guiding her, urging her to uncover the truth. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, deliberate, echoing against the wooden beams. She turned, but again, the attic was empty. Only the eyes in the portrait seemed to glimmer in the moonlight. Eleanor understood then that Rosefield Hall was not merely a house. It was a vessel for memory and longing, and she had become entwined with a story that refused to die. Outside, the wind howled through the eaves, and a soft tapping began at the window, rhythmic, persistent, as if calling her attention to the secrets that still remained hidden. The following morning, Eleanor awoke with a sense of purpose. The letters and diary had pointed her toward the lake, the same one Beatrice had walked along so many decades ago. She wrapped herself in a thick coat and ventured outside, the fog curling around the trees and the water shimmering like silver beneath the pale sunlight. At the edge of the lake, Eleanor noticed a small jetty, half hidden by reeds. She stepped onto it cautiously. Beneath the water, she could make out a wooden chest, just beneath the surface, trapped by silt and shadow. Her pulse quickened. Could this be what Beatrice had tried to hide? With trembling hands, she waded into the water. The chill bit at her skin, but she persisted, lifting the chest with a groan of effort. Once on the shore, she opened it. Inside were more letters, some stained and brittle, others surprisingly intact, along with a small locket containing a faded photograph of a man she assumed was Beatrice's forbidden love. Eleanor read the letters aloud. They spoke of passion, fear, and betrayal, but also of hope. Beatrice had planned to escape with her lover, but something, or someone, had intervened. The last letter ended abruptly. If this chest is found, know that I have loved and lost, but the story is not over. Find him, and you will understand. A sudden splash startled Eleanor. She turned, heart hammering, to see ripples spreading across the lake. A shadow moved beneath the water, large and dark. The wind picked up, bending the reeds, and the surface of the lake reflected shapes that did not belong. Eleanor realized with a chill that Rosefield Hall's secrets were far from confined to the house itself. They lingered here, in the water, in the fog, and she had only begun to uncover the truth. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Eleanor knew she could not leave until she had followed every clue. Beatrice's story was demanding completion, and the lake was only the beginning of revelations yet to come. That night, Eleanor sat in the study, the letters and diary spread before her. The house was silent, yet she felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her every move. A candle flickered, casting long shadows across the walls, and the air felt electric, charged with expectation. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the hall, soft, deliberate, insistent. Eleanor froze. No visitor had been expected. She hesitated, then whispered, "Who's there?" A voice, low and familiar, answered from the shadows. Eleanor. Her heart skipped. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She stepped into the hallway, candle in hand, and the temperature dropped. The flickering flame revealed a figure standing at the foot of the stairs, a woman, delicate and pale, dressed in early 20th century attire. It was Beatrice, exactly as she appeared in the portrait. "Why are you here?" Eleanor asked, voice trembling. "To guide you," Beatrice replied, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You must finish what I could not. The letters, the diary, the lake, they are all pieces of the story. Only when the truth is known will the house rest." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Moonlight streamed through the tall glass, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air like tiny ghosts. Beatrice moved closer, her presence both real and ethereal. "There is one more place," she whispered. The attic, the hall, and the lake were only the beginning. "You must see the room where it all ended." Before Eleanor could respond, Beatrice vanished, leaving only the faint scent of lavender. Eleanor's hand gripped the letters tightly. She knew the final revelation awaited her, somewhere in Rosefield Hall, a secret that had been buried for over a century, waiting for her courage to uncover it. The night stretched on, each creak of the house a reminder that the story demanded completion. Eleanor's resolve hardened. She would follow the trail to the end, whatever awaited in the shadows of the hall. Eleanor awoke to a house wrapped in mist, the silence heavier than ever. The letters and diary rested on her lap, their words urging her forward. She knew the final room awaited, the place where Beatrice's story had ended, and perhaps, where the house's restless spirit found its origin. With candle in hand, Eleanor ascended the narrow staircase to the attic once more. Each step echoed in the stillness, the shadows seeming to stretch toward her as if guiding her way. At the end of the corridor, a door appeared she had never noticed before. It was small, unassuming, and locked with a tarnished keyhole. She searched the drawers in the attic and, to her astonishment, found a tiny key tucked beneath a stack of envelopes. The key fit perfectly. Eleanor turned it slowly, holding her breath, and the door creaked open. Inside was a small room, nearly bare, save for a single writing desk and a chair. Sunlight filtered through a tiny window, illuminating a pile of letters that seemed to pulse with history. And there, pinned to the wall, was a map, an intricate sketch of Rosefield Hall and the surrounding lake, marked with paths and notes in Beatrice's hand. Eleanor read the final letter, addressed simply to whoever finds this. Here lies the truth of my life, my love, and my regrets. The man I loved was taken from me by fate and fear, and I remained behind, trapped by family and expectation. The house remembers every sorrow, every secret. If you read this, Eleanor, know that you are the keeper now. Carry the story forward, so that what was hidden is finally seen. A chill ran through Eleanor, but she felt a strange peace. The house seemed to breathe around her, the air lighter than it had been in decades. Beatrice's spirit, at last, felt acknowledged. As Eleanor gathered the letters, she realized the hall was no longer silent. A soft murmur of gratitude filled the room, like wind through the trees, and she understood that the story had found its completion. Rosefield Hall had waited a century for someone brave enough to uncover its secrets, and Eleanor had answered its call. The next morning, Eleanor sat at the desk in the room of truth, surrounded by the letters, diary, and map. Sunlight streamed through the small window, illuminating each delicate page. She felt a profound responsibility settle over her. Beatrice's life, her loves, her losses, they were now entrusted to Eleanor. Eleanor began to carefully organize the letters, cataloguing them in chronological order. She read each aloud once more, committing every detail to memory, until the story was complete. The air in the room seemed to shimmer, as though the house itself was listening and acknowledging the completion of its long-forgotten tale. Once done, Eleanor placed the letters in a wooden box, locking it securely. She knew she would preserve them, ensuring that the story of Beatrice Harland would survive for future generations. The house, for the first time in decades, felt calm. The restless whispers had faded, replaced by a quiet dignity. Walking through the hallways, Eleanor noticed how the light now danced across the walls, filling the house with warmth instead of shadows. The portraits seemed less stern, more like watchful guardians finally at peace. Even the lake, visible through the attic window, shimmered without foreboding. Eleanor understood that her life had changed forever. Rosefield Hall had revealed its secrets, and she had become part of its story. The letters were no longer mere paper. They were a bridge across time, linking the past with the present, giving voice to a woman who had waited a century to be heard. As she descended the attic stairs, Eleanor smiled softly. She had faced the mystery, embraced it, and preserved it. Rosefield Hall had finally rested, and a new chapter, in the form of her own life, was ready to begin.